Welcome to Leadership Unlearned and Reframed. When we speak about leadership, we are not only speaking about a role in an organization, we are inviting you to take up your leadership mantle wherever you are. It's very much needed in our families, in our communities, even our places of worship, and definitely in your local football team. So, this is the space in which we debunk what we've learned and we embrace the fact that we are leaders. And because we are taken away from you, we don't want to leave you empty. Hence the reason we are reframing. So, hopefully, during this call, you will, one, probably get a new thought or an idea. You may be provoked, and our guest today is very provocative in the best of ways. And three, you may develop your own frame of leadership and your experiences. So I'm really so happy and grateful to welcome Paul Cooper, the president of Face-to-Face Strategies, with us today. So, Paul, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about face-to-face strategies.
Well, thanks, Maxine. I'm grateful to you for inviting me to join you with this. So I'm looking forward to today. As you said, I have a little consulting firm based in Washington, D.C. Hearing the name always surprises me because I've been using that business name for 30 years now. And I just, it goes into my official, but it's really just me. So I am primarily a facilitator. I facilitate meetings. I also am an executive coach, which I think of as kind of an offshoot of facilitation. It's the same work, but working with individuals or small groups, teams. And then I also do organization development, which is facilitation stretched to the biggest extent to working with an organization. And I define my work as helping groups and individuals collaborate and communicate more effectively. And I've been doing it for about 30 years now. Maybe I've learned a thing or two. I've probably forgotten more things than I've learned. That is also my way. So I have an opportunity to work with a lot of different organizations in different sectors, and it's been endlessly fascinating to me. So I'm looking forward to chatting some more.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And when you're describing what you're doing, I just got that sense of elasticity, right? Because there's a way in which you described it, which started with the group, went to the individual, and expanded to the whole system. And it's a really good description of facilitation, coaching, and OD. And so, which one of those do you find yourself feeling more affinity for?
Yeah, I have actually, that definition that I just gave you, that really came out of the Gestalt course that you and I took together, which is how we got to know each other about 8 years ago. And prior to then, I only thought of myself as a facilitator. That was the work that I had gotten excited about and interested in. I had made a career shift in my early 30s and really landed on facilitation. It's what I felt, how I could contribute the most, how I could be of service. And had impact. And so that's what I thought I did. I thought I only did facilitation. I kind of ignored the permutations of it. And it was only through this class that we took together that I realized that they are really, the elements of them are, the overlap between the three is so dramatic. And it's just a question of scale. When I facilitate, obviously I see myself as a facilitator. When I do individual work or team coaching, I really see myself as a facilitator. And when I'm doing organization development work, I see myself as a facilitator. And the reason I like that word is because it embodies my ethos, my own personal ethos, which is to make it easier. Facilitation means to make it easier. I'm not doing the work for them. I'm making it easier for them to do the work that they have to do.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth. As you were describing it, my thought was, regardless of the work you do, you stay in, you are you. So you're not shifting to the client, you're bringing it in a different way to serve the need of the client.
When possible, I will say that sometimes clients are so powerful, they seduce me into trying to be like them. And I'll just give it a quick example. I have a client that I have worked with who is very high energy. She speaks fast. she likes to throw herself right into the middle of things. And when I'm on the phone with her, or we're in a Zoom call, I find myself mirroring her energy, and also that she also interrupts and stops short and takes these quick turns, and I find myself doing the same thing. And then I have to say, well, wait a minute, I need to pull that back a little bit. She's already got that base covered. Maybe it's a little better for me to be slower and a little more deliberative, to be a little different rather than just mirroring her. And so I like to think that I can do both things, but I have to watch my my impulse to try to match, to be so confluent with my clients that, as you know, I serve no purpose if I'm exactly the same as them.
Yeah, and I love the way you express that because that is a paradox we have to hold. We need to join so that the client feels comfortable, and then we
Yeah.
also need to be different so that we could take the client on the journey. And I love that management, right? Because I think if you probably didn't manage her, didn't mirror her high energy, she'd be like, "Who's this guy? Why is he
Right.
here?"
I'm dragging this guy along. Could you
Yeah.
perk up? Come on, get on the program. We got to move fast.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing is that there is a trigger, and I'm wondering for you, what then is that trigger that makes you decide, okay, enough of mirroring, let me change pace, slow down, and offer something different.
I'm not sure I have a clear answer for that. It's not that there is always. At some point, I realize I'm over my skis. I'm overextended. I'm not in my comfort. I'm not behaving like myself. I'm behaving like this other person. And I mean, this is a lifelong experience. I mean, this is how I've gotten along in my world, right? So I've always mirrored. I had a piano teacher when I was 7, 8 years old, and she had a little facial tic. And I would find that when I would have my piano lessons, I would get the facial tic. And I was only 8 years old. She didn't need my approval, but I was mirroring her, right? And at some point, when I realize it, when it reaches my awareness, then I have to say, like, hang on, this is not me. And even if it is me, I'm going to get exhausted trying to match, and I may get called out for it. Like, I don't know if my piano teacher ever said to me, like, "Why are you doing that? That's me. That's not you."
Yeah, it's so, that's why I think that one of the things, I mean, because I've had the experience of you face to face, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's one thing that always struck me about you, because I think you could walk into a room and strike up a conversation with almost anyone. So that there's power in being able to mirror. Because I think the power in that is holding out to someone else. We are similar. I see you, I hear you, I value what you bring, and I am standing close to you. And I think that
Mm.
that's one thing that I've always noticed about you. You walk into a room and you never leave alone. You're not standing in that room by yourself. And so it's so powerful. I mean, I do appreciate that sometimes it'll be like, okay, I need to stop. And I want to also appreciate that awareness, and I love the fact that it's sort of unconscious. So there's a pattern, right? I go in, I join by mirroring, everybody feels comfortable. And I know when to switch it off and take them into a different direction. That's very
Well,
powerful.
no, thank you for saying that, and that really makes me sound fantastic. Like I'd like me after hearing that, but obviously there are lots of times I walk into the room and walk out by myself. Like I don't always match, and I don't always mirror, and I don't always demonstrate respect for other people the way that by joining with them.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. I'm in this retelling. I'm saying that I'm able to pull back from the mirroring
Yeah.
at a certain point. But I know that I've had clients, and I, I've gotten to the end of some client experiences where at the end I've said, I can't be like that anymore. Like I've gone through the whole interaction with them and didn't notice how much I was giving up myself to fit in. And I got to the end and I felt bad about myself because I did not find my center. And I think having we talked in Gestalt about presence, right? I had a presence, but it wasn't an authentic presence in that case.
Yeah.
And if I'm not authentic, I at the end of the day, I'm going to feel, I don't know, bad about myself. I kind of reprove myself at the end, feeling like I didn't show up the way I wanted to show up.
Yeah, I get that. And that feel, that sense of self, it sounds like it got blurred. And I'm getting from you that sense of it could be exhausting and frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I'm not proud of myself in those
Mm.
moments.
Yeah.
I feel maybe a little ashamed,
Mhm.
because I've bent myself into a pretzel to fit some perception of what I think they want me to be like. And those are the moments that like, it's hard to maintain your self-respect when you're bent like a pretzel. Wait, that's a good quote. I need to write that down.
Yeah, and I laugh because it's like I laugh for one to ease the tension. It was heavy, and two, I laugh because I just imagine your arms and your legs sort of like pretzel like that. So it is a and one of the things that I do appreciate about you is your sense of humor, and the fact that, and just as you did there's a way in which I'm wondering if you how your humor serves you when you're working.
Well, it's always been a lubricant for social situations. I think probably earlier in my life I used it as more of a dodge, more of an avoidance, and I still use it to that extent. But at least I'm a little more aware of it. I'm a little more self-aware of places that things I want to avoid, and how I might use humor to distract,
Mhm.
rather than to deepen or support a relationship. Um, but I mean, it's always there. I would like to think that it's part of the way that I can join others. I show up within an organization. Anytime I join any group, I'm always going to be the other, and how much of an other will determine how well they accept me and accept whatever it is I have to offer them. And if I can smooth my edges a little bit by seeming non-threatening, by finding ways to join in humorous asides or humorous dialogue, it lowers people's resistance to me as the other and enables maybe me to find other places to connect on. I mean, if they just see me as a pleasant clown, that's not going to work very well. But at the first time I step my foot in the door, metaphorically, right? Pleasant clown is not the worst thing in the world to be.
Hmm.
And hopefully soon after that, they can perceive the ways in which I might be able to help them and be of support to them. But as I said, it's a lubricant more than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm definitely hearing that humor could be a glue or it could be a shield.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And and when I have been called out, and it has, unfortunately, it has not happened much recently, but it has happened. I mean, I get called out for being like, too silly, too not serious enough, not insubstantial. I mean, people read lightness sometimes as same as insubstantial. And I'm willing to accept that I could be insubstantial in some ways, but the worst cases has been that people read me as a fraud because I'm human, because I make jokes,
Yeah.
because I have a sort of a lighter touch. They see a fraud, that it is concealing, or it is I'm playing some sort of game,
Mhm.
right? And so it can be a source of distrust.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And so one of the things that's really that I'm really getting and sensing is the presence work, right? So how do
Yeah.
I work with my presence knowing that I mirror? How do I work with my presence knowing that I use humor, which could be accepted or rejected? And how do I stay true to myself in this moment? So I'm just thinking of how much work it is for you to prepare to enter a space,
Yeah.
and how much your reflection is after you've left a space?
I I I I think I've gotten to the point now that I feel pretty comfortable in my ability to assimilate into an environment. And again, this is not a work example, but my boyfriend's family is uh, lives we're in Florida. They're mostly in Florida. We went to a wedding. His brother was getting married a few months ago, and I didn't know anybody. I'd not met anybody in the family. He hadn't really talked about me much, so they didn't quite know who the hell I was. It's a Haitian family, so there's a sort of a connectedness, and
Yes.
I'm coming in really as an outsider. They don't really know who I am or what I am or what to do with me, and you know, I just went and I decided I'm just gonna go, right? I'm not gonna. I don't want to prepare. I don't need to have everybody's names and what their relationships are. I don't need to have you know little insights about people so I can find ways to get my. I'm just not gonna think about it. I'm just gonna show up.
Yeah.
Show up. Be respectful. Be present and show up. And and it worked out great. Like I knew the only options were they were going to either be nice to me and cool or nice to me and warm. And they were nice to me and warm. So to me, it was fantastic. Like I was very happy about it. And my boyfriend was very happy. He felt like whatever dangers he was fearful of never materialized. Um, but so that's kind of typical about like I don't want to show up. I don't want to prepare myself too much. In that case, I intentionally didn't prepare myself, and I kind of do that generally. I intentionally don't prepare myself because I just want to be whatever I want to see whatever happens and react to it in the moment. The upside of that is I can be present and flexible to the environment as it comes, and I don't have to be burdened with preconceptions too much. Because honestly, I had no idea what the wedding was going to be like. I had no clue. I mean, I'm entering another person's family, and I don't know anybody. Could have been here, could have been there, whatever. So I wasn't burdened with preconceptions. The downside is sometimes I show up unprepared, right? And so that's and then after the fact, I find myself saying, I should have really thought this through. I should have read that thing. I should have paid attention to something that I just fluffed off. But at this point, I try not to get too hard on myself because this is my pattern,
Yeah.
and it generally works for me. And in the moments it doesn't, I'll just go, well, okay, that's the time it didn't work so well.
Yeah. And what I'm I guess it seems like you really trust yourself and you accept yourself. You know where it is that you may be one thing too much or one thing too little, and you accept that.
Well, I mean, yeah, I guess so. I mean, look, I've lived a privileged life, right? Middle class white guy with a college education in the United States. Like, life's pretty easy for someone from my background, and I haven't really been confronted with calamitous crisis situations. And so this has gotten me this far. And chances are, if I play my cards right, it'll get me the rest of the way through too. I can give myself some credit for knowing how to manage these situations, but I also know that, I have not been put to tough tests. Other people have had much harder tests in their lives, and showing up the way I do is not an option for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks for saying that and acknowledging that and that level of, there's a way in which you made that statement, which was not about, it was such a statement without anything attached to it. It was a statement of fact. It was a statement of this is who I am. That this is the road that I've walked, regardless of how anybody might describe it. And I'm just really appreciating your self-awareness. That that is what comes out to me in this discussion thus far.
Thank you. That's very kind.
It's very true. So I'm going to open I'm going to open the floor to our audience. Welcome. And if anybody wants to make any statements, you can put your or ask a question or join the discussion in any way. You can just put your voice into the room, put yourself on camera, or put something in the chat and we'll take it from there. So the floor is open for you.
Can I say something first, Maxine? There's
Absolutely. Yeah.
three fantastic people who've joined us here: Angie and Jackie and Ryan, all wonderful. So I'm so happy that you all are here.
Hi. Anything that you want to add or join or anything? Angela or Jackie, and who's the third person? And Ryan.
Ryan.
Ryan, yeah.
I just say thank you for holding the space and thank you for the discussion. I think that Paul's self-assessment is very true, not only in his personal life, but in his professional life, I see as well. And I think that they're great lessons that all of us can learn and use. So I appreciate the space.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah. Yeah.
Paul, I appreciated when you were talking about how when you're working with a client, if they have they're like very excitable, like lots of energy, you like feed off that and then you start to take that on and then you're like, wait, I gotta like step back. I can't relate in the way that you are a facilitator, but I'm still a grant writer and I was a grant writer and consultant for quite a while. And it would be interesting to work with clients and realize like, oh, I'm coming away to like their way of writing, which sometimes was great. And other
Sure.
times I was like, not the right. You can still be your authentic self, and I will be here to help you put that into the wording that I know the funder will want to see. So it's interesting when you are sort of the consultant or you have a client, and it was a great experience, I think, to learn how to feed off of them when I needed to, but also when I needed to take a step back and be like, oh, okay, I'm here to also kind of mentor you or like help you see that you can come around to another way of thinking too. It's a fine
Angie, I love
line.
that. Yeah, I mean, like the word that came to mind as you're talking about that, Angie, is like boundaries. Like, what's the boundary between your environment and mine, and your style and mine? And we do not have to be the same. We can join without being carbon copies of one another. And then the other thing that came to mind, and I have said this in other contexts, which is that like when we're teenagers, all we want to be is exactly like everybody else, right? I want to be exactly like I don't want to be different in any way. And then you realize at some point in your life, wait a minute, being exactly like everybody else is not really, there's no benefit to that. Like what matters, what's interesting, what's valuable about me is what's different, what's special. And so if I'm mirroring, if I'm matching that other person, I'm trying to do an imitation of them in a way. And that serves nothing except to make me uncomfortable in a way, right? So how do I differentiate and in a way make that boundary without making myself so different that they can't even accept me?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not always something they teach in like entrepreneurship or, like when to set up.
No.
Yeah.
It's something, I mean,
go
sorry,
ahead,
go ahead.
Paul. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just said this is it's in a way it's a thing of trial and error, right? I think probably right at this point I have gracefully forgotten all of my mismatched failures, or as many of them as I can, right? I've just put them right out of my mind. The times when I worked so hard to match, to mirror, and lost myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if we look at we're talking about on the individual level, and we see that in the wider system, when companies try to copy the strategies of other companies without understanding the nuances and the context in which the strategy was constructed, we see what happens to that company after a while. Okay. So Ryan is saying there's a lot of ambient noise in the room I'm in, so I'll stay on mute. But I'm curious to hear about how you develop listening skills, when to let clients speak, when to paraphrase, and when to chime in. So Paul, you could take that.
Well, maybe everybody can talk to
And
that one.
yeah, we could all chat about
I
it.
think, I mean, boy, that's, I mean, I guess, how do you develop it is, I think, trial and error, and it's different in every circumstance. I worked with Israeli clients. Um, uh, so it's an Israeli company based in the U.S. The client, the actual client was in Tel Aviv, and then I was a subcontractor to an Israeli consulting company, and so it's me and some American employees and a whole bunch of Israeli leaders. And when I would be with the Israeli client and the Israeli consultants, essentially the one holding my contract, I could not get a word in edgewise. They constantly talked over each other. They would get into really vigorous arguments, not, to my mind, not listening to one another. I was in the car with three of them, and they were screaming at each other. We were driving from the hotel to the restaurant to have dinner together. They screamed at each other the whole way. And it's like, that's our client. Be nice to her. Just agree, smile. I couldn't believe it. But, that was their style, right? It very, very interactive. They finish each other's sentences for one another and very combative. And so my style didn't fit with them. I couldn't keep up with them at any rate. But in terms of the listening, it's a work in progress. I would say it's still a work in progress, right? I don't listen as much as I would like to think I do. There are times that in the middle of a conversation, I'll find I'm doing all the talking, so clearly I'm not listening very well. So it's the same thing. Like I find myself doing something and then try to correct mid-course because I'll notice I'm not doing the thing I think I ought to be doing. The thing I think would serve this process better. But I'm curious about others. How do you develop your listening and where to chime in and where to hold back?
Yeah, I think one of the things for me that around the listening is really divorcing myself from it, knowing that the way the brain works is the brain loves to mirror, the brain loves to complete sentences, the brain loves to jump to conclusions. So when I think of it as not me, and I think of it as I need to quiet my brain right now, that really helps me to sort of be in the moment and be present. So while my brain is wanting to, Paul is talking and I'm like, yeah, I've had that and I want to go into a daydream. I really just say, brain, let's stay with Paul and listen to it. So it comes back to again to that self-awareness, being aware of what your tendency to do is and being very clear about, okay, in this moment, I do not want to follow that tendency. At least that's the two things that work for me. Anybody else want to share what they do?
Yeah, I've found success with active listening. So for me, it's taking notes while someone's speaking. So I remember what I want to comment on later and don't interrupt them, but I still get to comment actively on what I believe I've heard from them. And so, when they're finished talking, using the technique of this is what I heard you say, this is what I believe, what I came away from hearing. But for me, it is definitely taking notes while someone's talking and sometimes exhaustive. But also I'll make myself cues in those notes to put a star by something or a box for an action item. So I know to go back to those things later and don't get just caught up in exactly what they're saying.
I'm hearing process and technique. Thank you for sharing those, Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Angela, anything you want to add?
Just my family. I feel like Paul is like the people you were describing.
Yeah. Now you say that, I have met your family, so yes, I agree.
Yeah, my husband is an only child, and I remember like the first time he rode in the car with my parents and my brothers and I, and he's like, you don't talk with each other, you just talk at each other. And you're like talking and someone's talking, and how are you hearing what they say? And I don't know, you just get used to it when you come from like a loud family, I guess. But I appreciate what Jackie said she does, because I think that is like it can be, when I'm working with a new client, a lot to take in, right? Especially if we're talking about like a grant, for example, we're going to go after, and it's a combination of like their thoughts and their questions and their understanding and sometimes misunderstanding of something. And so I do the same thing where I just feel like I jot everything down. I've actually started to use Tactic, which is an AI tool that can help summarize meetings and things like that. For my organizational work, it's been kind of game changing, because I feel like during board meetings, I'm not so caught up in trying to figure out the minutes of it, but rather I can like really actively listen and then go back and digest what the meeting summary is. So Jackie, if you haven't used it yet, it might be worth a try. But it's been, yeah, I think like going back to what's written down and kind of like putting it in different compartments, right? Like, this is what I heard you say, this is what I think you were trying to say, maybe help me out here, and make them part of the re-listening making them part of re-listening has been a really good exercise with a lot of people I've worked with.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
thank you for that. So, Paul, so we've been talking about active listening. So, as
Yeah.
you've been actively listening to your clients, what is coming up in their system? So, what are you seeing that is really top of mind for everyone? Well, for most.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's different. Everyone's in a different place, I think. I mean, there's a few things I think that are sort of that I'm hearing a lot of, which is, you know, the struggle or the challenge of managing remote workforces, um, the the push pull between I love it, I want the opportunities, and the costs that they seem to be exacting. I don't think leaders that I work with have quite figured out how to get the benefits and not lose the connection between people in the sense of synergies. Now maybe they have, you know, they could have a slightly misremembering how great things were in the past, because, you know, there's always a complaint about getting people to work together, to communicate and collaborate. But I think it's a little stronger now, and people are tagging the hybrid workplaces as one of the reasons for that. And so that, I think, is a challenge. And then in general, I think it's a sort of an evergreen comment, but I think it comes back a little more strongly now, which is this sense of trying to get everybody enthusiastic about what we're doing. That I think people feel maybe that, particularly maybe the less senior members of the team, are less committed than they were in the past. And there's this feeling of disconnectedness. Now, that may be the same thing. You know, maybe it's the hybrid workforce, maybe it's something else. But the perception that we're not all pulling together, we're not all in it together, this sort of togetherness piece feels more fraught, I think, for people. And they're not quite sure what to do about it. Whatever tools they've got or they tried are not addressing that adequately.
Yeah, I really connect a lot with that sense of disconnect. I imagine if I were an employee now, would I be connected to an organization? And to me, the question is, the bigger the organization, the more the differentiations are. I really wonder how I would react. And I think about, the different generations coming into the workplace with their own characteristics. I think of people coming through COVID. I guess I was having a conversation and with a group of OD practitioners. And one of the things that the leader of the group said is that organizations have welcomed people back to the workplace, and they're talking about productivity, and they have not addressed the grief and the loss and the anxiety from COVID. And I think
Yeah.
until we deal with those things, how can people be connected? You're not seeing me, you're not seeing what I'm struggling with. Why should I contribute to your productivity? So I
Yeah.
think that's a real thing, and that's something that I'd love to know your thoughts on, Paul.
Yeah, well, I think it's exactly right. I mean, I strongly echo that. I think people are living with trauma today, and it's unaddressed trauma, and you know, trauma can't be papered over and it can't be set aside. Sometimes the workplace is not the best place to deal with it, but if it's a work, you somehow you have to manage. You have to at least acknowledge its existence and have a place for it, right? It needs to be in some ways recognized without violating people's individual privacy or their individual rights. And so grief, loss, anxiety, I mean, absolutely, loss of trust in institutions, loss of trust in authority. And it's absolutely generalized, but it's also specific. I don't trust my company. I don't trust my boss, right? That is there, and it varies from place to place and individuals. But I think so I would strongly agree with your colleague who made that point. And there are things that as practitioners we can do to help that, but a hard part of it is to get people, to get the boss, the leaders, to acknowledge that is a thing worth addressing, because they don't want to do it by and large.
Yeah,
they want to either pretend it's not there, or they got various different ways of dealing with it, but without dealing with it.
Yeah. And I have compassion for both sides of the equation, because I mean, like, just the thought of talking to somebody about their grief or the loss could be very, very icky, right? What words do I
Yes.
say? Do I trigger something? Am I going to use the right language? And at the same time, so it's a real paradox, because at the same time, I know that I should deal with it. And then finding the proper resources. So I know that Paul is a facilitator, but is he comfortable facilitating a conversation on grief and loss? Is it fair to him for me to ask him to do that for my employees? So it's a big question, and I'm just wondering. Well, and it's more than that, right? Because at the community level, we've lost trust in our leaders. We don't believe that what they're doing, and I'm from the Caribbean, right? So just for context, we don't believe that politicians are what they were 50 years ago, that they had a sense of nation building. We more or less believe that politicians are now in it for personal gain. So a lot of the narrative has shifted, and a lot of it is like, where are we going to trust, and who do we trust, and how can we bring trust in our teams, and how do we work? So yeah, so I'm not really expecting an answer, but one comment would be great. And please, Jackie and Ryan, I know you're typing, Ryan, join in.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear either from Ryan. And Ryan, don't worry about the ambient noise. Are you in an airport or a library, or where are you?
There you go. Can you hear me? I'm on headphones,
Yeah.
so it might. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm University of Minnesota lobby.
Okay. Those headphones work great. I was in a conversation once with a client who was at the back of a boat with an outboard engine crossing Lake Champlain, talking to me on the phone. I could not hear. He's holding the outboard engine as he's running. I could hear him perfectly. No motor sound. So technology, man.
Yeah, I guess in my work, I work for myself in fitness, and I don't have bosses like that where there's been a breach of trust and acknowledged disruption. But my boyfriend Zach consults on burnout and stamina, and sees this directly every day, that companies want to skip over. It's like, we thought we could skip over racism and capitalism and go to the future, and it's like, oh no, sorry, back up. Or a healthcare company that's nurses are all burning out, that just wants to provide some sort of self-care routine and jump over all of the damaging structure that has ruptured so much, and there's no jumping over, and no company really wants to pay somebody to come in and tell them that. Sadly.
Yeah, it's an uncomfortable situation for everybody involved.
Yeah.
It's the hard truths, right? The very hard truths. Jackie, you were going to say something?
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you said those words, Ryan, skip over, because I think that, when we're in the middle of COVID, when we're in the middle of all of the racial unrest, right, I felt like companies were doing a good job of having those conversations and having group conversations and having educational sessions and book clubs all around how do we deal with all of these different things. And I feel like, now that we have been back at work, that a lot of that work has stopped. And I feel like, clearly our community, the world as a whole, has not finished processing all of that trauma. And so I think, your words skip over exactly, right? We're skipping over this big step, and just expecting folks to move back to whatever normal is, knowing that none of us are, normal is new. And we haven't even had a chance to define what that is yet. So I think that, that's certainly one of the things that I wrote down to talk about is that I find that folks are brushing it back under the rug, and unfortunately, that leads us back to a place where resentment can build and things can bubble back up. Right, it can get back, very contentious very quickly, and I think we'll see another surge of traumatic happenings because if we don't go back and address these things. So I think I see that on a large scale throughout the world and the U.S., of course, but certainly larger organizations and universities that are doing this and skipping that step. And then I think it's addressing the generational differences, where I think most of us grew up in a time where, you went to work for a company and that's where you worked your entire career. And, this shift that we've all been experiencing, that's, been changing, where folks change, they change places, they skip over, they go skip around, right? They go to different organizations every 2 to 3 years, and that's a normal thing where we're not building relationships. We don't have time to build relationships. So I think that really affects communication and then how well we feel tied to those organizations that we work with. And so I think, there's still lots of butting heads between folks our age and older and the younger generations that just have different experiences and different wants and needs. And so I think it's figuring out how we best blend all of those styles and honor all of those styles. I think certainly the remote work conditions are much more palatable to the younger generations. And so I think, again, we would just have to figure out what the right mix is. And, we're far from that for sure.
Well, there's so much there I want to unpack.
Yeah.
I love all of that.
So juicy.
I mean, this is like any conversation with Jackie. I just have to say, this is like, there's so much there, right? But here's a word that came to mind as you're describing some of these dynamics, Jackie, for me, and also Ryan, the things that you're describing, which is impatience. And by that I mean that, this idea of we're done with that. That I want to put that behind me, and I want to talk about it. That's impatience to move on to the next thing when I haven't resolved the thing here. And the easiest metaphor is, you mentioned this, Maxine, at the beginning, which is grief, right? Are you over it yet? Right? The idea that you should be over a loss, right? The grief would have an end point. That's a kind of an impatience, an attitude that is much less prevalent today than it used to be, but still there is this sense like, why am I still grieving this? Or why are you still grieving this? You should be done with that, which is a false construct. But That's because of impatience. And, organizations not wanting to, or individuals not wanting to address this because they want to move on to the next thing. When we let the impatience take control, as you said, Jackie, it bubbles back up. It comes back later, right? It doesn't go away. It just goes below the surface. And when it comes back much worse. There's an explosion. Yes, absolutely, Maxine, explosion, or it comes back laced in resentment, and it gets a reaction from other people that is completely different because it is wrapped in resentment and all that energy. It's hard for other people to process, and it feels derailing and illegitimate. Yes. Right? When something comes back that wasn't resolved, when it shows back up, like, why are we still talking about this? I mean, yes. You can hear people complaining about it, and that has the resentment wrapped in it. It's wrapped in resentment. So it's resentment about each other. And then you're pitting people against one another when really the underlying problem is simply that we haven't taken care of ourselves. We haven't taken care of ourselves from the beginning at the time we should have or could have. So leaders don't want to do it. Individuals don't want to do it. And then we all pay the price down the road because of that impatience. And impatience is one of those things that I am aware of in myself. And because I'm so aware of it in myself, I see it. I mean, my antenna is really tuned to impatience. I see it everywhere. And I think this piece about, let's just move on, I see that just through the lens of impatience.
Yeah. And it's two things I want to add to that. One, it's that impatience that makes us not check in with each other. Mm. And we're talking about, the question Ryan asked about the active listening, how do we? So part of that is that impatience that makes us want to skip over to continue the metaphor. And the other thing is that this notion of normalcy, before COVID, a lot of people were in trauma. And the way that we dealt with it is that we had to keep quiet about it. I think during COVID, those dams burst. And now that it's after COVID, when people are saying, let's go back to normal, they're trying to put the water back in the dam and the water's out. And we have not yet begun to mop it up. And so we're all flooded. And some people are literally like, the water's here. And we are not pulling them out by listening to them or offering the services that will deal with their grief, loss, and anxiety. And, it is easy to skip over because the water is there for us to throw the stones, right? We could skip stones over the water literally because it's so high. And it's like, what are we going to do? And I think part of the doing is where I get confused because I like to do. And I know if Rama was here, Rama would say, Maxine, you need to be, be what you can for other people, be what you can for yourself and in the systems that you operate within. So like this space, offering this space for these type of conversations and connections. With my family, what is your role in your family? That's something that I've been considering a lot since COVID. And even, with my clients, they'll be like, okay, what is my role? Sure, you wanna, make a good living or whatever, but what is your role in the moment? So it's really brought me to a place of pause and really limiting that natural impatience that I have. And even Paul, you would notice that I speak a lot slower than when you first met me. And that's been part of the journey, right? Just slow down to be present for myself as well as for other people.
Well, what do you do? What has been part of that? What is part of that journey for you right now? Like, how are you keeping yourself at that slower pace, or what enables you to be at that slower pace?
I think the word is surrender. And it's not a religious word. It's surrender in terms of one, what is your core belief around life? So if I come from a belief that it's scarce and I have to fight for it or I have to go and get it, then that really becomes a very, everything has to be fast, everything has to be sure. But when I surrender and say, the universe got me, It's like, and so for Ryan and for Jackie, I moved to the US recently. And when I moved to the US, I really didn't know what I was doing here, and I was talking to Paul and some other of our practitioners, and it was like, well, do you have a plan? And it's like, no. That would not have been my modus operandi 10 years ago. I'd have a plan, I would have this, but now it's like, I got here and it's okay. And it will continue to be okay. And I think that has been the shift, that surrender, that belief that it will be okay. I think that is, and for me, that's what COVID was. It was a test of you're saying this and do you really believe it? And I would say during that period, sometimes I failed the test. I was like full panic mode. Oh, God, the sky
Sure.
is falling, Chicken Little, right? And then, but getting back into that really belief system where it's okay and I don't have to do all the million and one things. I think that's been the shift for me.
Is that a surrendering from an illusion of competence?
Control.
Control. Wow.
Yeah, control.
So if you have a plan, then you control all the dynamics and you can make sure that things get done the way you want them to be, and you can have the outcome you want to have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not in control. So you can have I have a plan, sure. I'll work the plan and I leave it to the magic of the universe. And I believe that the universe supports me. So if it falls flat, there'll be something else, that will take it in a different direction. But it's been a huge shift. And and sometimes I really ask myself the question, are you being for real? Like I ask myself that question so many times, are you for real? Because there's a part of me who's watching me and saying, this girl is crazy. This is not true. I'm waiting for the bubble to burst. I have that personality that is observing and saying, you for real? You don't want to take control of this? You sure? So it's an ongoing conversation with me and my non-believing self, and we're rolling with it.
Well, I mean, you did the thing, right? You moved to New York. You like, and once you do that, like you're there. So you either need to roll with it or undo it.
Or roll home.
Right, roll and go home. Exactly.
I feel like in the post-election therapy sessions and stuff like that I've had too, in this moment of dealing with the past and impatience for the future, and a key component for me is de-emphasizing my individual and emphasizing the community, whether that's me and my partner or me and my family, eventually maybe the country or world. But it's that feeling of like, oh, I got this because I have a plan and I can make it through. And it's like, giving up on that control, so that, because as a community we will, as a support system for each other, I guess in this moment that's kind of the mind shift I have, is de-emphasizing individual and emphasizing community.
I love that. I love that because it so debunks what we've been told, right?
Totally. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why we ended up with, not to get too political, but some of the political implications. It's emphasizing the individual.
Yeah. And I think that's and what I love about what you said is because that's what we saw during the pandemic, that people were forced into community. And one of the ways in which we've drifted from that, is when things opened up, we sort of went back into our little enclaves. And I'm just hearing, that it's what you said just really struck me. It's very beautiful. So thank you, Ryan, for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And Paul is smiling. What's behind? Paul and Jackie are smiling. Tell us what's behind the smiles.
That was fun. I like this conversation. Can we have another hour? Actually, I'm thinking also I should call Jackie. Should call Ryan after we're done here.
Correct.
Yeah, definitely connect with your people. Yeah.
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 Well, I was just thinking though that I think you're talking, Ryan. You were saying about putting your attention on the community, actually, you know, in my approach to the trauma of the outside world is I disassociate with. I pretend I stop looking at the newspaper. I stop paying attention to world events, and I start focusing on the hyper local. You know, tomorrow I'm going to volunteer at a thrift store, and like I've done this before, but I haven't done it in a long time. And the reason I'm doing it now is because I need to put my hands on stuff and my feet on the ground. I need to be in the here and now, and I need to be interacting with other human beings, right? I need the reassurance that the world still exists, right? That there is still, I'm still connected to other people, right? And even if it's just in that little volunteering moment, which is not going to change the world, right? It's just a little piece of the world that I'm affecting. I need to feel like I matter and what I do matters. And I need to make it as hyper local as possible.
That's still community.
That's right.
It is.
You can redefine it if you'd like.
It is. It might be temporary, it might be fleeting, and it is. Yeah, thank you, Paul. And thank you, Ryan. And Jackie.
And it is changing the world.
Yeah.
Because step by step, all the little things build up to big things, and that's how we affect change.
Yeah. Think globally, act locally.
That's right.
Yeah. I think I'm full. It's been it's been you know, I love these conversations for the main reason. One, you never know who'll show up, and then two, it takes its own form. And I guess again, going back to I don't have to control it. So I don't have to send 5 questions and say these are the questions we want answered. This is also, I guess, an expression of my surrendering. So surrender and trust the people who show up and trust the moment that they show up in that it will be created for itself.
Well, it works. So thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think we have 3 minutes before we move to close. And so,
Okay.
Paul, I guess we could summarize our experience and everybody could just come on and say what they're walking away with or how they're feeling leaving this conversation, and then we'll close.
Well, I will just say that when I saw Jackie and Angie and Ryan on the participant list, I was like, oh my gosh, like 3 of my favorite people. This is great. And I really do mean it. Like, so to me, that has just made me feel warm and yeah, just like I'm appreciating my friendships and my relationships with them. And then Maxine, I'm really grateful. You reached out to me to do this. And I think I said to you, like, why me? Right? And I'm still not sure I have the answer, but I do appreciate that you invited me to do this, and it's been really wonderful. So thank you. I'm grateful, and I feel warm. So
yeah. You're most
thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah, you're most welcome.
And I'll just finish with an appreciation for some structure to when you work for yourself and every day is flexible and whatever, you never really get the chance for like an appointment to sit down and listen and formulate your thoughts. So, you know, a more regular Zoom for you guys might be an impediment, but for me, it's a help.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ryan. Jackie?
Yeah, and for me, it's just a reminder that that everyone we encounter is an opportunity for relationship building. And when we can think about leadership in terms of building relationships in the way that several of us on this call have built relationships, I think that allows us to be better, more human leaders.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, it's been such a rich conversation for me thinking about one, Paul's community showed up. It would be people who he would have sent it out. You all would see him and came out to support him. And that's, you know, what we ended with. So we started focusing on Paul as the individual. And as the conversation expanded, the community on the call came together to really create something totally new and totally different. And I think that's the power, as Jackie was saying, that's what we talk about when we talk about leadership. We talk about the fact that together we can co-create something with someone, as Paul facilitated in that leadership role, and also recognizing that each of us come from a sphere where we bring our experiences of leadership to create something new. So I really want to thank each of you for showing up here today, and it's been a beautiful experience. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
Thanks, Maxine.
Yeah. See you guys soon,
Bye,
Jackie
everybody.
and
Good to
Paul,
see
especially.
y'all.
Yeah.
See you.